Do you think you earn enough to have a decent standard of living in London?
No, no way at all.
No.
It's definitely too expensive, I'd say.
It's very expensive to live in London.
And that's why places like where I live, Essex, is flooded with ex-Londoners.
It's pretty expensive. It's the cost of living in somewhere that's a bit more exciting.
Terrible, it's too much, especially if you're not working. The bills find it difficult to pay.
The cost in London is quite high compared to other cities in the UK.
Well, I do get help with my rent, otherwise I would not be able to live in London because I get state pension and that's my only income.
Part of the trick for me is knowing where the less or the more affordable places are, but in London they are fewer.
Can't really afford luxury foods anymore. I have to go to like cheap shops.
I don't eat out because I can't afford to.
Do I earn enough to live in London? Nobody does.
Over a quarter, so it's 27% of Londoners actually live in poverty. The impression that people have about poverty residing in inner London, in social housing, amongst unemployed people, is turned on its head. We've actually got people in work living in outer London in private rented sector.
So why is this happening? Is a job not enough anymore to get people out of poverty?
No, that's the sad part. I mean, despite the fact that we're at an all-time low in unemployment, there are jobs that have been created which have been at the low end. So they're paying minimum wage, or what's now referred to as the living wage, which doesn't enable people to have a decent life.
Well, I'm a GP receptionist and I earn £16,000 a year. In London, it's very difficult to earn such a little amount and have children and still manage. I have been in a situation where I've found it really difficult to pay a bill. I've asked a family member to lend me money, sadly enough, or I've had to use a credit card to pay it off, which is, I know it's a big no-no. They always say don't use it unless you can pay it off in full. But when push comes to shove and you have 2 young children and you've got to put a roof over their heads, you just do what you have to. So even if it means paying off a bit here and a bit there and cutting back on something else just so you can make, you know, that rent payment or council tax payment or whatever the bill is.
Is this the end of the beginning?
How different are things in London compared to the rest of the country? You know, is this specifically a London problem? Why is it so expensive to live here?
Although people's nominal wages, in other words the amount of pounds they get in their pocket, might be higher, the real wages might be lower because we've also got to distinguish between nominal incomes, in other words the actual pounds people get in their pocket, and real incomes, which in London are squeezed because of the very high costs of transport and accommodation and all that kind of stuff.
I'm from the north of England. For example, my brother has just bought a house for the same age, he's my twin, a 4-bedroom house, and his mortgage is 2/3 of what I pay for rent here for a 2-bedroom flat that I share with friends. So yes, that's in Cumbria and it's completely different, completely different. The cost of living is a fraction in comparison to living here.
I'm 30 and I rent, and I definitely don't have a mortgage, unfortunately. Yeah, no, it's really hard to get on the property ladder, so definitely a renter.
And roughly how much of your income goes towards accommodation?
I'd say with bills in as well, like 60 to 65% probably goes on rent, which sucks because I'm lining someone else's pocket.
I spend about £250 on food shop, but that is also including things like baby wipes and nappies for my son and toiletries. And for my rent, That's the majority of my wages gone. Without the government's help, I wouldn't be able to rent a house. I would either have to be on a hostel or living with friends or family because it would be impossible.
Most of us, you have to stay in a hostel rather than a rent house, because in a rent house you pay more. Pay more like council taxes, you pay more like water, you pay more like... But when you live in a hostel, it's a little bit better. But it takes half of your wages.
The amount that's eaten up by accommodation in London for me, for my spending, is about half, 60%, like on average. So, like literally about half of the amount I'm getting, I'm putting it away for like transport and living costs. So, yeah.
They normally say that the affordable amount should be no more than 1/3 of your salary, and I definitely spend more than that. And I don't know anyone my age who spends less than half of their salary going on rent. I mean, it's a no-brainer. We need more houses being built. We need more things. We need more construction. Like we are in a deficit of, you know, properties compared to how many people need them.
We went on the streets recently and did vox pops with Londoners, and they said to us, you know, a huge proportion of the salary is going towards rent and mortgages and so on. Yes. So I was wondering how widespread that is.
Yeah, just to put that in context, the poverty figure without housing costs, which is what's referred to as before housing costs, is at around 15% across the country. When you put in housing costs, London rises to 27% and the rest of the country is at 21%. So you can see the impact that housing is having on Londoners.
Would you say that the common minimum wage is enough to have a basic lifestyle?
Not at all. No. Now if you was to say 50, then I'd say yeah, pound.
I genuinely do not see how even slightly above that minimum wage you could actually live and be right. It's tough.
If you bear in mind that you pay around, if you have to use a travel card to travel from zone 2, you pay around, what is it, 100 and something pounds a month just for transport, just to go to work and back. And that you pay tax on everything that you buy, and that the utilities, council tax, no, not really. You end up with like, what, 200 pounds to live on if you're earning that money? Or working overtime and just basically doing what a lot of people do here, which is work like a beast and then come back, sleep and go and work like a beast and come back, you know, and that's not living, that's surviving.
We have it harder than a lot of people because the closer you need to live to central London, the more expensive it costs, but the further you live out, the more travel is. So I think the offset doesn't pay off. So I think with income, it needs to reflect that need for travel and living to even be at work in the first place. So I think, no, that's definitely not enough.
The living wage is substantially different from the government's minimum wage. And the difference is dramatic. You know, the living wage is at £10.40 as opposed to £7.83. It's only applicable to over 25s, the minimum wage, as opposed to the living wage to over 18s. So it is different.
What would you say to those people that say, even if you earn the London living wage, it's still not enough? Because I mean, someone on that kind of salary, they still wouldn't be able to afford a house or own their own house in London.
No. This is a difficult one, isn't it? Because living wage will improve their condition, but it doesn't address all of the issues that people will face. So the argument that we've been working on, or at least the model that we're trying to develop, is it's as much about what people have in their pockets as it is about what it costs them to buy the essentials, you know, whether it's a roof over their head or food to fill their belly and their children's bellies, clothes to buy, shoes to wear.
So literally I get paid like $10.50 an hour, and then at the same time I do a lot of shows outside, so I have to kind of do gigs in order to make my pay a bit more higher. It's a struggle.
As you can hear, I'm not originally from here. I'm from Bermuda. All my family's in Bermuda. I have no support here, so literally I have no savings. Everything goes to either rent or travel or food. And even sometimes you have to decide which one you want to actually, which one's going to be the most important for that week or that month, because you can't pay all of them.
If I could get about £12 an hour, I'd be a lot more comfortable, I would say.
We are care workers.
We are care workers.
Minimum wage to me is supposed to be at least £15 an hour. You know, it's a very, very tedious job. You have to put all your effort, all your body, your soul.
Yeah,
It's supposed to be at least £15. You know, if they can do that, we'll be very, very, very happy.
The London living wage, no, it's not enough. Instead of individuals as employees coming together and putting pressure on their employers to pay them more, you have a group of academics, experts, economists, social scientists, often appointed by government or advising government, and they make the decision on our behalf effectively, which lacks the kind of pressure that might be put on wages in a different situation.
How do you think the solution should come about? Like, how do we put pressure otherwise?
I think the experts really on what people should be paid are people themselves. You know, they're the ones who are trying to live within the constraints of today's cost of living. They're the ones who know the struggles they face. And who's to say that they should just get by? You know, I think what's perhaps lost now is that sense of self-interest. If you are arguing from the perspective of your own interests, you can articulate what it is you think you deserve. It's always going to be subjective, but at least then there's a sense in which people are attempting to have a conversation about what is reasonable, about what they're worth. And in that sort of circumstance, you're much more likely to get a better reflection of what people should be getting.
I think in London, I'd say maybe the government or policy makers are kind of out of touch with what Londoners want nowadays and what they need.
It just takes so much energy, and you know, it's like, does democracy really work anymore? Because it's like we're not being listened to.
I think it's massively left to the individual to deal with it, and you end up thinking, oh, what am I doing wrong, or why am I not working enough, am I not doing enough? You end up taking it on as your own problem, and to a certain degree I could work a different job and make more money, I guess.
But I wish there was a part of me that would be like, no, actually I don't think that's sufficient, and I wish I could be more vocal about it with not just this job, I mean in jobs generally, but I'm not that kind of person.
We've seen in the past that many campaigns have brought about change, certainly in the people's living standards, whether it be their salaries or what have you. Why don't you think people are out there campaigning to change that?
I guess a lot of individuals don't feel that they have the power. As a society, we don't talk about money, we don't talk about living costs. It tends to be kind of every person fights for themselves. Talking about money is gauche and vulgar, or it's complaining, or you're moaning, and I think if we open up that conversation, then maybe we'll get to a place where people might feel, empowered to campaign, for better lives.
I think the issue for me actually is not so much the campaigns for increased wages, but it's also about inequality. Inequality is a pain for all of us, actually, as much to the people at the top as it is to the bottom. It doesn't make for a successful city. And I think the thing to do is to now start addressing the pay differentials that we've got within the country. People are earning 500 times, 600 times more than the lowest paid in their organization. You have to start asking questions. Why is that? Whereas it wasn't as big a disparity, I would say, even 10, 15 years ago.
But some would suggest that even bringing the top down, so the people that are most wealthy in our society down, wouldn't necessarily do anything for those at the bottom.
No, it wouldn't. But it would create. It wouldn't create a level playing field, but it would at least lower some of the discrepancies that we've got. And all of the evidence seems to be from the spirit level is a book that most people will refer to. Is that the evidence is that the greater the inequality, the unhappier the place, the unhappier the people, but also it starts to manifest itself in a number of different indices, whether it's drug usage, homelessness, you know, illnesses generally, etc. So it's an important issue to address.
I mean, for me, poverty is more of a problem than inequality, in the sense that I'm not particularly worried about the fact that people are well off and there's some very rich people. That's fine, but I am concerned with the fact lots of people are really struggling to get by in London. I think it's another one of these things which appears to be very radical and very left-wing. But if it's pitched in such a way where you're saying, oh, let's attack the fat cats, the fat cats should have less, they should rein in their income, they're really irresponsible for consuming too much. I think it's a way of making the argument about limits more popular, giving it more popular resonance. So although the people who put it might in many cases be quite well-meaning, I think we should reject it. We should say, no, what we need to do is to raise living standards for everyone, not bothered about the ultra-rich. Everyone should be better off. Otherwise you just feed into this narrative of everyone's going to make sacrifices, everyone's going to be prepared to make do with less, which, as it happens, ordinary people don't benefit from that narrative, despite it sounding very left-wing and very radical.
So is that why, in your book Ferraris for All, you coined the term growth scepticism?
Well, growth scepticism is basically, it's about the people who say, well, of course I believe in prosperity, of course I believe in growth, but, you know, you've got the inevitable but in there. And then they'll say, but we have to make sacrifices because of the environment, we have to make sacrifices because of inequality, we have to make sacrifices because growth doesn't make everyone happy. So it's kind of an anti-growth argument, but in an indirect way.
Instead of arguing for greater material resources, for greater wealth, there's this sense that that's not possible, that what we should do is have a ceiling above which nobody must earn any more, which is to reduce people's kind of ambitions for more. There's this sense in which it's an attack on the bosses because they're earning too much, but it's not, it's an attack on everybody, because the implication is that there's only so much you can expect, and that we should contain our desires for more, and we should divide up the resources that are existing at the moment.
So universal basic income, which is an unconditional pay regardless of your other income. Is that a solution to eradicating poverty?
It's an intriguing idea, but I'm not convinced it's a solution to the poverty problem or the welfare problem necessarily. In a sense, again, it's an expression of a lack of commitment to trying to improve people's incomes and trying to deal with the wealth problem, the fact that society isn't generating much wealth, and that there's a lack of productivity in the UK in particular. The real economic problems that underlie the fact that people aren't earning enough.
If we're not necessarily using the trade union movement and we want to demand greater wages, is that something that we're taking on as individual responsibility in terms of our relationship with our employer?
Yeah, inevitably at the moment, because of the collapse of the trade union movements and because of wider changes in society and the decline of that old left-right divide in politics, there isn't the kind of collective response to people's incomes falling or for people's kind of material problems. So inevitably what we have is a kind of very individual reaction, which is not a positive one. It's got an anxious one. I think people are anxious about their jobs because they're not secure, and there's a lack of expectations that things can improve.
I have considered moving out of London because obviously it's a lot cheaper. However, because I have the support of close family and friends with my children, they help a lot with looking after them while I'm at work and stuff, it would be really difficult. So it would be good in one way, so financially it would be quite good, but then I wouldn't have the support of my family and friends, and they say it takes a village to help raise a child. It really, really does.
It's about if people really want to see that change, you know. We see these revolutionary movements in history and it's always started with the people. People are fed up with it. So if people really want to see the change, then we have to go out there and demand it.